The Merry Wives of Windsor by William Shakespeare. Falstaff is in need of money. So he decides to try and seduce Mrs. Page and Mrs. Ford, the wives of two wealthy citizens. Falstaff sends identical love letters to both women. But they realise what his scheme is and they decide to play tricks on him to teach him a lesson. Meanwhile, two of Falstaff's disgruntled followers decide to tell Mr. Ford and Mr. Page about their master's plan. Mr. Page chooses to ignore them. But Mr. Ford is very jealous. He pretends to be somebody else and pays Falstaff to pursue his own wife on his behalf. Falstaff accepts, not realising it's actually Mr. Ford in disguise. The wives invite Falstaff to Mrs. Ford's house while her husband is out. When their husbands return unexpectedly, the women have Falstaff hide in a large laundry basket. They have Falstaff carried outside in the basket and dumped into the river. Still in disguise, Mr. Ford returns to Falstaff to find out why he was unsuccessful at seducing his wife. Falstaff tells him about the basket, and Mr. Ford realises how he was deceived. Falstaff says he has been invited to go back to Mrs. Ford's house, so Mr. Ford decides to catch his wife in the act. When Falstaff returns to Mrs. Ford's house, the wives have him hide by dressing up as an old woman. Mr. Ford then beats the old woman out of the house. The wives tell their husbands about the tricks they have played, and then decide to put an end to Falstaff's mischief. They tell Falstaff to disguise himself as a mythical hunter figure and meet Mrs. Ford at night in the woods. However, in the woods, locals dressed as fairies surround Falstaff and pinch and tease him as payback. In the end, Falstaff realises that he deserved this punishment for trying to seduce the married women and makes amends with everyone.